8th, 2021. This is the last show for the week, and I am Tulio Sirgusa, broadcasting live from Southern California. I'm joined by Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico. Hi, Kim. Welcome back.
Hello. Thank you.
And Carlos Ponce from Cuernavaca, Mexico. Thank you guys for being here today. And of course, why do we do this? We want to talk to some awesome tech luminaries who are shaping the market. You know, I always say you can read a Gartner report or you can talk directly to the people making the market happening. That's what we do here. So welcome, Beth. This is your second time on DojoLIVE. Good to have you. I think you're broadcasting from Boston. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back. It's a pleasure.
So Beth, before we get into the topic today, which is an interesting topic about cross-functional team collaboration and AI, before we get into the topic, let's reintroduce you to the audience. The audience has grown since the last time we had you, so it'd be great for them to get to know you a little bit, and then we'll talk about your company, Riff Analytics. But first, let's get to know you a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Beth Porter, and Riff Analytics is one of my many sort of endeavors. It's my primary endeavor, but I'm also a college instructor at Boston University. I teach IT strategies there to MBA students at night. So these are students who are coming back to school in the evening and completing that work alongside with their jobs. It's an awesome experience, and I enjoy it so much. And then I'm always involved in other ed tech sector activities. But my primary love and the thing that I do is Riff Analytics, and learning as we go how teams work better together, and how that is the core way in which companies are successful, by advocating for collaboration, fostering teams and team development, and rewarding people who have that as a priority in their jobs, and working with both learning institutions to teach that skill set, but also working with corporations to help measure and learn while you're still at work.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit how Riff Analytics came to be. What gave birth to this company? What is it that you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, it's a good one. So I was a school teacher. I taught middle school, high school, college. I taught math. That was my first love. Was really excited about that as a career. And I moved to Boston and took up with some developers. I moved over into the software sector because it was really heating up when we first got here, and it looked like a much more attractive sort of professional prospect than teaching at the time. I said, I'm going to try this for a couple of years. It's going to be great. And then I'm just going to go back to teaching. It'll be fine. 25 years later, I'm still in the software industry, and I've been able to combine teaching with software. But in all of that time, I thought, always about the teaching practice and why there's so much to learn from teaching. Like, you're not just the teacher, but you're also the learner all the time. And one of the things that you do to foster a learning environment in your classroom is to do peer learning and collaboration. It was a core interest of mine from the very, very beginning. I always had my students in teams. I always had them thinking about how to create ways of learning from each other and not just from me. And I still do that today. So I was really interested in that problem. I was working at edX as the head of product and part of engineering there. And I met some people from MIT who were also interested in this problem, but from a completely different angle. They were very interested in how organizations work and organizational behavior and organizational theory, and applying mathematics techniques to social science to learn about organizations, and in particular how small teams work, how they're effective, and what you can measure and know about small teams in order to make them more effective. So we sort of saw each other and we're like, it's the same problem. You're solving that problem. So am I. We're both looking at that problem. Got super excited about it. And so we worked together at MIT for a while, and then we brought the Riff product out of the lab.
Excellent. So why Riff? There's got to be some background behind the name there.
There 100% is. It's from music. So if you think of a group of people who are together making music, they riff off of each other, right? Somebody plays a guitar, part, and then somebody else in the band is listening to what they've played, and they're like, oh, I can pick up on that, right? So originally from jazz, but lots of bands really practice this form of riffing off of each other in all musical types. So that's where it comes from.
I love it. When teams work well together, it's like a symphony. So let's go right into the topic today. It's going to be an interesting conversation. Kim, are you introducing the topic?
Sure, thank
Please
you.
introduce the topic.
Honestly, I think Beth introduced it really well already. The topic of choice today is using AI to improve how cross-functional teams communicate. So Riff, I'm sure, is the link to the AI piece. But before we get to the AI piece, I wanted to ask you why it matters, right? Why should companies and teams, first of all, what is cross-functional team communication and why it matters?
I'll do a little bit of all of what you just asked me about. Why collaboration matters. I think it should be evident, but I think in some situations it doesn't always seem evident why collaboration is important. Why we value collaboration is because we can't solve the problem well by ourselves, right? This is the whole, like, if you just want to get down to, it's not about, the culture or a mandate or any of that stuff. It's just because you cannot effectively and completely solve a problem all by yourself. So collaboration is a means to an end in a way. But one of the things that really effective collaboration does is that it not only helps you solve the original problem you set out to solve, right? So like, hey, I didn't know a thing. I had to go to Carlos and ask him a bunch of questions, and we sort of went back and forth and we collaborated on solving the problem. And then I went back and I was able to finish my job. Or maybe all four of us sat down together and we said, well, I don't know what to do. I'm bringing you together because you all know things I don't know. And so we're going to solve it together. So really it comes down to that very fundamental problem. Why we focus often on cross-functional teams and not, vertically integrated or small teams, although it doesn't really matter because everybody's got problems to solve, is that cross-functional teams are often solving very complex problems that require them to look across the organization or the domain to be able to solve them. And so the impetus for taking a collaborative approach is really high. Right? There's literally no way you can do it without involving the others. And so cross-functional teams are sort of a unique monster, a unique animal, a unique, sort of space of collaboration because the nature of the problem is usually really, really complicated and the driver for solving the problem is there with other people.
So one of the things you talked about or you introduced as part of the topic was this idea of real-time diagnostic feedback, specifically in virtual meetings and how that can promote health collaboration. So I'm curious, first of all, are you suggesting that the technology tracks how people collaborate with each other? And how do you actually identify the key things to give feedback on? How does it work? Give us a little bit more, please.
Sure. Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. Real-time diagnostic feedback. I realize that's weighty, so let me break it down. So the real-time really does mean real-time. If we were all together in a Riff meeting and we were collaborating on something, we would have a meter in the corner that actually shows who's dominating and who is less participatory at that time. And our sort of job with respect to that meter is to not have it dominate our perception, but to have it in the side view to note that at this moment, I'm dominating, I'm speaking a lot, and maybe I haven't invited Kim into the conversation. Or, Tulio, you haven't spoken in several minutes. And, I have at least a peripheral awareness of the fact that there is imbalance. A lot of research shows that imbalance in conversations, particularly ones in which the primary driver is collaboration, the primary driver is information sharing, right? And it could be for problem solving or decision making or brainstorming. You need to have a lot of information flow. Everybody's got to participate. So having that real-time analysis and that real time is a really important part of it.
I've got a quick question, Beth. What do you
Yeah.
mean exactly by imbalance? Because I can think of different angles. It could be about either the amount of information shared or handled, or maybe the time spent in the conversation, or even the level of authority that is part of that group that is having that communication.
Sure.
So, what do you mean exactly by imbalance, please? I would appreciate if you could elaborate.
Sure. Yeah. So, in addition to the sort of the more obvious one, which is speaking time, right? So, if I dominate the entirety of a call that I convene in which I was hoping to get information from others, I've done a poor job of balancing the communication just at a fundamental level, right? Speaking time. And even more than speaking time, which is just raw minutes, we track something that's called turns. And turns are important because if I simply have 20 minutes of speaking time, and then you have 20 minutes of speaking time, Carlos, and then Tulio has 20 minutes, et cetera, et cetera. And we all have even speaking time, but it was a totally undynamic exchange. We just sort of all took our turns and then we walked away. That's not very good information flow. That's broadcast in a structured way with multiple people. So what we're looking at is not just speaking time, but turns. And the more turns and the more dynamism there is in a conversation, the more information flow there is. The second part of it is around the kinds of conversational events that we track, and that is interruption and affirmation and pausing to some degree. So if if you're like right now, this is perfect. Kim is giving me an affirmation. She's nodding. She's saying, yeah.
Maybe my glasses didn't let you see my eyes roll up in my head as I was going through and making sure I understood what it was that you said.
What happens?
Okay, I get
it. What happens if someone on the screen starts doing this?
Oh, well, that's only negative affirmation anyway. But if you just take the spoken, let's say we'll set aside the facial gestural, and I just wanted to point it out because you did it in such perfect timing. But if you just take the spoken affirmations that somebody gives you, right? They say, oh, or uh-huh, or or I don't know. All that stuff is just social signaling that tells you that they're engaged. They don't have to agree with you. Don't let the word affirmation throw you. It's just that they're paying attention. They're giving you the verbal signal that they're paying attention. Let's say that all the time that Carlos speaks, I'm always like, oh yeah, interesting, cool, that's great. And then when I speak, Carlos never gives me any feedback of any kind. That's another kind of, it may not be a negative one, but it is a kind of imbalance, right? There is less affirmative parity between us. And the same with interruption. If every time Tulio and I speak, I always jump on the end of everything he's saying, and then he takes a very different and respectful tone with me and never interrupts anything I'm saying. Again, it's a piece of imbalance, and it is worthy of consideration whether that's a respectful and a fully healthy dialogue that's going on between us.
Is there any analytics that can happen on the quality of the content as well? I know that right now there's this huge buzzword out there called mansplaining, right? Where, right? And I'm not trying to get all political or anything here, but is there a way for it to be like, so-and-so had that idea, it didn't get received, and then another person came along with essentially the same idea and it was well received? Or is that too complicated at this point?
It's too complicated for what we're doing right now. But it's an excellent question because, in fact, a lot of the ways in which you can use the measures that we do have and use it as a proxy for the things you're talking about is about the third metric, which is influence. So we have an aggregate metric on the screen after the meeting is over around influence. And so if every single time I speak, you speak, right? Every time, if I'm always affirming you, I'm always interrupting you, I'm always speaking after you, I am very influenced by the things you're saying, either positively or negatively, almost to the exclusion of other people, right? If we saw that pattern, it'd be really evident that there is a very high exertion of influence on you, on me by you. That is a proxy for the thing you're talking about, although not a perfect one. That said, we are moving into speech to text. A lot of what you're talking about is the mirroring of language and the restating of things that may already have been said. Those are some things we can pick up from natural language processing of what's said.
As I'm listening, it sounds like an engineering marvel what you guys have done. So let me just see if I understood. there's a meter that basically sort of gives a temperature on how well the team is collaborating. Let's call it how well they're collaborating. But you have certain science behind how you determine that. And I guess my question is, who determined that science? Is this some kind of methodology that you guys have adopted that's out there? How do you program the system to be able to determine these very complex scenarios?
Yeah.
How did you guys do that? Is that where the AI comes in? Please, I know we could talk for hours about this, but if you could just at least give us the gist of it, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can definitely give you this is our IP. This is definitely the science behind the simplicity of what we represent on screen. So this is more than a decade, almost two decades of research. Some of it out of MIT, and that's sort of the lab, the group that I was in when I was there, and what we came out of the lab after doing a lot of research around these very topics. And many people have contributed to that scholarship. And then there are some other organizations that are equally well looking at how do you capture real-time data that's meaningful that you can then use to create clusters of different kinds of spoken moments. So this whole idea of what's a interruption, what is that? How do you measure that? How do you know? If somebody interrupts you, how do you know it's an interruption? So there's some science there. And then doing some, analytics on measuring the effect. Why do we make this set of assumptions about the spoken moments and their impact? Well, that's all based in predictive analytics and modeling that's been done for many years around what creates effective teams. And one of our co-founders, Sandy Pentland, is a premier authority on this very topic and wrote a really interesting book, which I'll encourage you to read, called Social Physics, which is really the foundational social science, computational social science that sort of underpins everything that we're doing. So we took all that, those years of scholarship, and we put it into a real-time model.
Beth,
impressive.
Beth, let me ask you something. This morning, when we had a conversation this morning, and when we met, we did so on a
that was on Riff.
Yeah.
Were you
okay.
riffing?
So was
we were riffing this morning.
No.
Carlos and I, we were on Riff this morning.
Yeah. I know. The reason why I brought it up is because when the meeting was over, I was able to see some graphs, some charts, and some information related to what had just happened.
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, was that Riff Analytics in action, or what happened?
Riff Analytics in action. It's exactly it. So that real-time feedback on screen is about just sort of the last 5 minutes that was happening. And so
interesting.
That's
amazing.
That's actually, I want to just riff off of that real quick. So who gets that report? Is it individualized, or the team lead, the entire team sees it? I'm trying to figure out because you're basically creating self-awareness for each individual about how they're participating and whatnot. So is it something shared across the team, or is it individual? How do you actually do course correction based on the information?
You got it pretty much, actually, Tulio, which is that it's about you. So you get a report about you and your perspective, how much you contributed, what your balance measures were with respect to those things I was just talking about: influence, affirmation, interruption. But the shared parts of that feedback that you get after the meeting is over is the spoken time, which everybody can see, and it's the same for everybody. And we also give a timeline of every single spoken event that happened for the entire meeting, so that you can look at it and you can zoom in on it and analyze it and see what happened at particular junctures in the meeting. But the management doesn't get that. They're not going to know that in the last meeting, I interrupted you 22 times. I should not do that, but they're not going to know if I did it or not. We give leaders, managers, the organization aggregate reports, and say, hey, this is what you can see in the gross order, in the aggregated data across a team or a course or a learning experience or executive coaching or whatever the various contexts that we're in, because that's your data. very personal, and we really take that sort of privacy approach to giving people their own data.
Is there, in addition to the reporting and the data that's provided, is there a what's next? Is the AI able to help with identifying course correction paths, like suggestions as to what you might do differently, or books you may read, or exercises?
It's an excellent question, and we get it a lot, actually, Kim, so I'm kind of glad you asked it. We're not a prescriptive product, which means that you're, to some degree, and I'll explain sort of the larger answer in a second here, to some degree you're on your own to take what you've seen in the measurements that we provide and become more self-aware, and to some degree also more situationally aware. Maybe in a meeting that you and I are in, Kim, alone, we're super dynamic and interruptive and like completely stomp on each other, and we're just like having this this riff off. We're just really, very, very but balanced, but just really interruptive. If we take that same dynamic and we put it into a meeting with 4 other people, they're going to hate us by the end of the meeting, and they're going to wish that one of us would leave. So we have to be more, not just self-aware, but situationally aware, and have the right dynamic for the environment that we're in. And so that's why a lot of the people who adopt our software are in coaching, learning, development, sales enablement, customer success, all the places where you're trying to get better. And so you want to have more self-awareness and more situational awareness in order to improve. And often a structured program is a great way to do that.
It would have been interesting, Beth, to use this technology with us recently at our we had we usually have like an end of year party and all that, but this year, for obvious reasons, we did it virtually. So we had several of them, and then you had like, what, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 people at one time having random conversations or even guided conversations around the topic.
Yeah,
it would have been interesting to see what the numbers were, or what the results were, what the outcome of that was, and just see how we can.
Some research that we did last year was on that, not in a social, well, no, we've done social ones too, but some research that we did last year was in a course. And the course was a bunch of business professionals who were taking an online course on a technical business topic, for, their own edification and their career acceleration and so forth. And the course was designed to have not only a broad-based asynchronous environment for them to all chat with each other and build a community, learner community, but they also had Riff as the video tool. And every group was tasked with both ad hoc, get to know each other kinds of activities and structured activities where they could learn how to work together more collectively. And all of that activity showed us that this feedback mechanism, where people are learning about themselves while they're meeting, often for the first time, right? The course is a flash formation of people in a community. They don't know each other ahead of time. It really helps. They gel faster. They come to know each other. They can work more effective collectively, and the outcome is that they perform a lot better in those environments. So you're absolutely right. This can help foster that whole dynamic much more readily.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's any use cases where just the implementation of this helps the individuals become first more aware of their themselves, of because some people may interrupt, but then they don't even realize they do it, right? It could be cultural, how they were raised, could be a number of reasons why they do that. So just creating awareness that they're doing it, it could be fantastic. There's a sense of like, oh, I got to work on this. But I'm curious to understand, are there use cases that show the impact that the increased collaboration, the improved collaboration, the impact that's having on organizations, and how wide of an implementation is recommended so that that collaboration can continue to add to more success? I guess I'm just curious to see, if I was asking what's the ROI on this in terms of improved efficiency or improve the output from those collaboration? Are there any numbers around that yet? I know that this is still in
It's
the
early days. Yeah, it's early days on numbers, but I'll give you an anecdotal answer to that. There's one customer that we work with that is a consultancy, and they're what they're interested in and what matters to them is what we started with, which was the cross-functional nature of a lot of the way that we team at companies, right? It's all in your own team where you start to understand the patterns of interaction and you get to know each other, and you're working all the time in both very ad hoc and sometimes structured ways. Your feedback about each other may be very, very informative to help gel the team. But with teams you meet with infrequently over long periods of time on disparate topics, there's less of that. And so their goal was to try to create more cross currents in the company, more ways in which people felt compelled to reach out to their colleagues to get those answers to those complex questions, instead of just saying, well, I guess it's just me and my team and we're going to figure it out together. So the whole purpose was to create more cross-cultural, cross-team, cross-company, relationships, and that was what they sought out to pull off, and they used Riff for that.
I mean, it makes sense. In some way, it's sort of like a fun little game, like, how's the meter shifting? and I love it. So one of the questions I have for you, and it's super timely, given that most of us are working from home these days, is that it's for virtual meetings. Yeah. What happens when we hopefully get to go back to our office buildings, to our schools, and wherever we are? How's Riff going to shift?
Yeah, I mean, Riff is going to be what it is, which is a virtual collaboration. And one of the things that we like about that is that no matter how much we go back to being in our own, offices, virtual is not going anywhere. We are going to continue to meet on video. We're going to continue to be, at least in part in most companies, working from home on some kind of a schedule. And it will, nobody's going to go back to the way it was working before. So we feel good about, having invested in the virtual framework that we're in. That said, we're not, we started as a company we started in the research lab producing a thing that you wore. And that was how we measured people's vocal data. And that's how we measured conversation. I don't know if we'll go back to making things like that, but we don't really care where the signal comes from. So if we partnered with a hardware company to do the analysis behind the scenes, that would be an interesting direction for us, actually.
Yeah, I don't know that we'll go back to the way it was for a very, 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 very long time, if ever.
I agree, but I think eventually we'll be back in person, and I would still be interested in this type of tool at the conference table. Right?
You should give that pendant to every member of Congress and see how they collaborate better. They need it badly. So I'm curious to ask, are there any levers that I can establish? Like, let's say I license this, and I'm trying to fix a specific pattern, perhaps. Are there any levers? Can you customize specifically what you're trying to get? Like, some people hide out in a meeting and they just sit there and don't participate. Maybe I want to get more participation. Is there a lever I can establish, or it just automatically covers all those things?
Yeah, right now it automatically covers all those things. One of the things that we experimented with last year, and we weren't happy with the way that we weren't happy with the interaction pattern, so we're still working on it, is giving individual nudges to people. So right now we have this group nudge, right? It's on screen. And as Kim was saying, I like this, right? You're sort of all collectively responsible for making sure that the purple ball, which is what we have, stays in the middle. But as an individual, Tullio, you're right? There might be one person who really needs a nudge to speak up, instead of just having the collective responsibility of somebody telling Tullio to speak up. And so when we get that interaction pattern right, and it doesn't feel too invasive, because that's what people complain about, they're like, it's a little disruptive, then we want to reintroduce nudging back to individuals.
I like it. I like it a lot. Carlos, did you have a question before we're coming up on time?
No, not really. Tullio. I don't have any more questions. I've been fortunate enough to have conversations with Beth before, so we're good. And I'm sure the audience are going to have questions. If there are questions from the audience, and this is just a friendly reminder, you can do so on Twitter, and of course, social media channels that we're broadcasting through.
I got one question before Kim has a closing one, and that is, are there plans to integrate this with other platforms like Zoom or Skype or what have you? Is there where they can license this? Because this is an amazing plug-in, add-on, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That should be on every platform out there, especially if you're in business or and an educator. This is like a necessity, in my opinion, based on where we are today as a society. So what's the plan? Is that in motion?
Yeah, no. So the marketplace of, whatever one you use, and there's, half a dozen of them, Teams, GoToMeeting, Blue Jeans, whichever one you're using. The very idea that people should want to have the stream to do something interesting with it that's an extension beyond just the video conferencing functions itself, that's a new one in the industry. So we've seen some emergence of marketplaces for other apps to come in and start to play side by side with these video providers, whose really main job is to make it a pleasant, easy experience that scales anywhere for anyone on any device. So that added value idea that somebody else could come in and add value to the ecosystem of a video client, that's new. And so we're paying attention to that. Zoom has a marketplace, and that's sort of ephemeral and emerging, and there's a lot of activity there. And we're seeing some activity in other places too. So it's not quite there yet. What we need is really, really a deep integration, but it's emerging and coming soon. And we want to do it as soon as the marketplace is ready for it.
We'll definitely keep our eyes open for that. Kim, you got a last question?
My last question, if your home is any indication, you're an avid reader. What are you reading, and what do you recommend to us, in addition to the book that you've already recommended?
I read a lot of I read a lot of
That's a good one.
Science fiction, and I just read a book called Annihilation. I think it's a couple of years old, but my daughter gave it to me for Christmas, and it's great. Because everything I do in my workplace is so sort of deep and cerebral, I need I'm an escapist literature kind of person. I like to read books, but I really do like to read things that are mostly fiction.
It's like Netflix on a page.
Yeah. So I need to escape from the cerebral domain into something that's.
I love it.
Yeah.
I like it. Well, Beth, it's been great to have you. This was very informative. We're going to keep an eye on you and your company. We wish you a lot of success. Definitely a worthwhile service to have, helping teams collaborate better. I mean, who doesn't want that? So thanks for being with us. Just stay with us as we get off the air. I want to remind everyone, we're going to have the recap show on Monday at 12 noon. We recap every show we've done this week in 10 minutes. So we just quickly highlight the key things we've learned. And hopefully for those who didn't watch, get encouraged to go watch those shows. And if you want to watch this or any other show, just go on our site. You can also use the search box for specific topics. There's out of 400 interviews, chances are there's something that interests you that you're going to find. We have an incredible rich library of the people actually creating the marketplace, talking directly to the audience. So check it out, and you can learn about
the movers and the shakers. Right? Yeah.
So what do we got coming up next week? I know we're way over time today. Thanks for bearing with us a little extra time. It was worth it. What do we got coming up next week besides the recap show, Carlos?
Absolutely. Next week, we're going to have RJ Stevens, the CEO of AirDeck, which is a platform to create shareable presentations with narrated voice and video. And also on the following day, that's going to be on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we're going to be speaking with, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Tuesday, RJ Stevens at AirDeck. And then Wednesday, we'll be speaking with none other than Tatiana Mahmoud. And she is a transformational technologist, keynote speaker, product innovator, the works. So both are going to be happening as ever as 12 noon right here on DojoLIVE. 12 noon Pacific right here on DojoLIVE. So stay tuned for those.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.